in some of the Caribbean territories, you would still see evidence of that. So, like for example, that revolutionary spirit is very much in Jamaica as well. Recently, Jamaica had an election. I think it's just a couple of days ago, and I am not even talking about the results of the election because I think they were still in some issues with that. But at the end, out of the 100% of people that can vote, only 29% actually voted. So only 29% of the Jamaican population participated in the election to elect whoever they elected.
We don't need to rely on the monitor, which is the European, to do the story for us. We don't to do the connection for us, to tell us what the people in the diaspora are thinking, and then tell the people in the diaspora what the people in Africa are thinking. We don't need to do that. We don't need an intermediary anymore. We need to do the study. If you are a university lecturer in California, you don't have any problem connecting to a university in Accra or a university in Lagos or in Johannesburg or in any other part of Africa. Liaise with them, talk to them, ask them questions.
Some of us have a lot of misconceptions towards each other, based on a lot of things that probably I just said. You might hear somebody say, oh, the Africans them don't like, Americans, or Africa don't like, Caribbean people, and you get a lot of these misconceptions, whereas with things like these, opportunities like these, where we get to discuss and share and exchange ideas and views and opinions, we have, things happening at present, like Woody Maya right now is in Jamaica, and he has traveled to a number of Caribbean islands and is doing this in a more tangible way. We are doing it virtually, in the sense of, exchanging ideas, from the Caribbean to Africa. We're doing this on a virtual level, but he's doing it on a physical level where he actually go to the various territories, immerse in the culture, meet with the people, and beginning to recognize how much of African cultures and traditions that exist amongst the people. Just for the Caribbean, but globally, because his work spanned throughout, the United States, back into Africa, and in the Caribbean. And when you look at his accomplishments and the accomplishments he made within the short space of time, and at his age, and at the historical time, when you start to put it into perspective in terms of analyzing the way the world was at that time in comparison to the way it is today, and that's why I say it's sort of depressing still. You feel great when you look at the kind of work that he did, but then you look at us today and you really wonder if he wouldn't be turning in his grave right now, by how we still have not even achieved a quarter of what he did within his time, and what he anticipated, seemingly we have regressed, So it's really quite fitting that we are going to be, addressing, such a topic today. And I really look forward to engaging, the discussion, because one of the things as well that is very fundamental is the fact that he was very much instrumental, and one of his major focus is one of my major focus. So it is that bridging that gap between Africa and the diaspora. And getting us to see each other as one and be able to create that oneness that is so needed at this time.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're so right about that. And that is at the heart of what we are doing here, which is connected among ourselves. I've done a couple of interviews today, actually, because we need to leverage the technology that we have now to do more among ourselves, to connect among ourselves. I think we can do more. We can do more with the time that we are living in. I'm not saying we're going to assume the burden of our ancestors, but we are certainly going to be able to connect and able to do more. Look at their steps, the steps that they were taking, and continue in that, because the journey is not supposed to stop when we are born. It's supposed to continue. It didn't start with us, and it's not going to end with us. We are just in the passage. So we need to run a good race so that then we will hand over the baton to the people that are going to come after us. I think that is what is going to be very interesting in the conversation that we are having today, talking of the great man, Marcus Garvey. So tell me, when was the first time you hear of this man?
I can't pinpoint exactly when. I know it would have been very young in my life, probably at the primary school level. I think probably I was introduced to him or his life as a part of some studying in maybe something in school. But I think I got more interested in his life as I began to embrace Rastafari, because within Rastafari, he is a prominent figure, is seen as a prominent figure. Many would argue that, Rastafari and the movement towards Rastafari hinges upon Marcus Garvey. In some respects, Marcus Garvey is seen as the the biblical John the Baptist in their view or from their perspective. And so there has been and there has always been that those teachings of Marcus Garvey that has been a part of that movement. And so based on my early influence in Rastafari, I began embracing Marcus Garvey and learning about Marcus Garvey. And then at one point, I eventually bought a copy of the book, The Philosophies and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, and delved into a bit more of his life, his philosophy, his views, and opinions on various different aspects, And that is why I said, in looking at his life and his contribution within the historical context, being able to put yourself into that time frame and being able to understand what he would have been going through at that time and what he was able to achieve at that time in history, it was and is quite an inspiration still. Also, when you start to put into context the fact that he was self-taught, he wasn't a college or university graduate. This is just a simple, humble brother with a spirit and a determination, and with that charismatic ability to lead, and was able to demonstrate that as small as he was in figure, he was able to command and demand that level of respect and togetherness, and be able to lead from historical accounts over 2 million men in the United States of America. And so, reading those things, learning about those things, and feeling and embracing what he was, pushing in terms of encouraging you to learn more about your African brothers and the contributions that they would have made, and giving you that level of empowerment that that you can do that, and whatever anybody in this world would have done, regardless of their color, their race, or whatever, you can do it too. you have that, so those sort of empowerment, those sorts of, and hearing it and seeing that, like, gave, begin to give you that motivation and inspiration that, yeah, you have greatness in you, and, don't seek to limit yourself by anything, just, push forward. So I got that level of inspiration pretty early on the journey, and it has continued, so I found myself in a lot of ways, some of the things that I do and I continue to do, I still feel the Marcus Garvey energy coming through, because it's basically things that he wanted to do. Even what we are doing right now, it's he was into the media. At that point, newspaper was the means of getting the message and the information across. Um, but today we have means such as this, and we are here doing something similar, seeking to empower our brothers and sisters to come together in whatever ways and forms, and use our, whatever we have learned here in the West. He, quite interestingly, um, though he had that push towards repatriation, he still was open to those who are willing to assimilate into whatever cultures they're into. And if you want to live, that's okay. But he wanted to be able to create the opportunity for trade, so that he went through the process of seeking to get the ships that would have been able to facilitate those who wanted to repatriate, if that's your desire, or if you just wanted to trade, be able to go back to the mainland and get stuff and bring it back, and be able to still maintain your culture and your life, and create your own economic space and all that within the capitalistic society that existed. So, it was really, really powerful. And it is understandably within the time frame, the historical context, that it affected um, many people, and more so many of the Caucasian Europeans at that time who held power. He was really a threat. And based on the history, you would see that they sought to found, um, to do anything to get him out of America, based on his influence. Um, and so it's really impactful, the contribution that he would have made. And like I said, it's really sad when I look at, some of what is happening today, not just in America, not just in the Caribbean, not just in Africa. We have not even gotten to that level of organization at this point, and that is one of the things that he sought to do with the UNIA. Sought to create that ability so that we can network and make things happen. And now we are in a position where we can do a lot more of that with the advent of technology and all that. Look at what we have here. I don't necessarily have to travel to Africa to be able to build a network, or cooperate with some people to make certain things happen in the Caribbean or in the US, where I'm at this present time. But we are still not united enough to make some of these things a reality. We are seeing some shift being made, but there's a lot more that still needs to be done. So it's great that a young brother like you is thinking like this, and is not just thinking, but like Marcus Garvey, is actually acting and seeking to reach out and make these things a reality. Because it, it's kind of interesting, because I'm originally from the Caribbean, and here you would have a brother like Marcus Garvey, who have such a influence globally, even from a philosophy standpoint. Marcus Garvey ranks with some of the top philosophers in the world, right? But yet, in his hometown in the Caribbean, I mean, Marcus Garvey is only mentioned at some point when you talk about maybe Black History Month, or celebrate. Even the Emancipation Day is not necessarily given the sort of respect and credence that I think, that should be given to a day like that in most of the Caribbean territories. In Jamaica, where Marcus Garvey is from, and then there's another story because in a couple of recent years, there was a document that surfaced on St. Kitts and Nevis, which lays claim to Marcus Garvey being born in St. Kitts, and that's a whole other story in itself. But anyway, in Jamaica, where he's from, there's still arguments that there should be a subject in school on Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey is not given that sort of respect. He's given, he's the first national hero, but he's not given still this sort of credence, because when you are to look at what he was fighting against, that system is still in control in most of the Caribbean territories. So you still have a Westminster governed system, though we claim we are independent in a lot of the colonies, the former colonies of Britain. You still have a system where the Governor General is the head of state, and the Governor General is the representative of the monarchy. And so you would have had that fight against those people who did not assimilate into that sort of thinking and the teaching of the British, and so that you're able to fit into that British society, versus those like Rastafari who more adhere to the Marcus Garvey philosophy and movement, and thus got ostracized and oppressed within society from people who looked like them but represented the monarchy and the systems of the monarchy. And so that continues. So you found when Marcus Garvey was alive, they didn't even want Marcus Garvey to enter the schools to talk to the children. And even today, no, he's not with us physically in flesh. There's still that fear, I guess, of if his philosophies are supposed to be taught in the school system, then the people are going to awaken their consciousness and be able to recognize that that system of governance, and that is what we fought against, and so we shouldn't even be giving any credence to that. And so there's that fear of that sort of revolution, and that's one of the reasons why in the previous conversation we had when we talked about Rastafari, I start to mention that what they sort of did, which is part of what is strategy of the system as usual, to find something to distract or to deflect from the reality. So they used cannabis, and the fact that Rastafari used cannabis as a part of the sacrament, they criminalized cannabis and used that to fight Rastafari, so to speak, just so they start to use the mail fraud to get at Marcus Garvey. So cannabis was used, so to speak, to put Rastafari in that bad light. So they were not robbers, they were not thieves, but they opposed the system that they represented. And so they were empowering the people to not deal with the system. Just so Marcus Garvey was saying, we could be in the capitalistic society, but let us build our own economy within ourselves, work for ourselves, do our own thing, and build ourselves as a people. That is the philosophy of Rastafari. So Rastafari was like, okay, we could be in your system, but not of your system. We have our own contractors, we have our own builders, we build our own schools, and we have our own society. And we don't have to, interfere with what you are doing. But that became a threat to them. And so Rastafari was fought, and likewise Marcus Garvey was fought. So there is that similarity that you could look at when you start to delve into the influence of Marcus Garvey on the people, and some of the reasons why his philosophies still may be fought, suppressed, and not given the kind of credence that they should get in his hometown and even on a global level.
A person like Marcus Garvey, we could be talking about him every day, and it will still not be too much because he's a man I respect a lot because he have a lot of influence, not only in the diaspora but also in Africa itself. And you are saying, but a man like that, we should have monument all about him in Jamaica, which is his homeland, and every Jamaica should know him right from primary school, from kindergarten until the university. They should table debate about him. And I know that a lot of Jamaica, maybe those that are outside the country, of course, they revere him, we know that. But maybe they need to champion the story more because this is their story. This is their brother, their blood. It's our blood, it's our brother. So we need to take the story to the next level. I know there are documentaries around Marcus Garvey. I know there are books around Marcus Garvey because himself was a prolific writer. We know that. But we need to do more because this is our story. Now, this is an error that I think a lot of Africans have made, and also African in the diaspora, is that we have expected other people to tell our story. We have expected that they will include us in their story. But this is what we have found. They did not include us. Wherever they have included us, they have told a story that will make us to be ashamed of ourselves. So the conclusion, therefore, is that it is our turn to tell that story. It is our turn to reshape the narrative. It is the duty of the African diaspora to take on their story and retell it again and again. So I want to repeat again. If we talk about Marcus Garvey, organize debate, argument, write books, just talk about him every day, it will still not be too much, except we haven't understood what this man stood for. Marcus Garvey will die in 1940, and Rastafarian movement started in 1930. That is, which means that he was alive during this period. I want you to tell me what kind of connection we can see of him in this movement. Was he really inside the movement? Did he do anything particularly in the movement? So let's spend some time talking about him so that why this particular movement have a lot of regard for Marcus Garvey.
Well, you see, a lot of what I would be expressing in this discussion would be things that I would have learned along the way. Because one, I am not originally from Jamaica. Two, a lot of, well, I am not old enough to fit myself into that historical space. So a lot of what I would be sharing would be what I've learned along the way, right? The Rastafari influence, though the movement started in Jamaica, so to speak, quite rightly, within that space, you're talking back in the 1930s, you would have had that the what you call it, the transatlantic slave trade, the early emancipation era. So people were you still had that deep class society structure. You had the mulatto, so to speak, and some of these things were more defined in some of these territories. So the experience in the Caribbean differs from island to island or country to country, and you would find that the experiences are different. Marcus Garvey, however, after he was deported from America, he came back to Jamaica and started the movement in Jamaica with those same concepts. The one God, one aim, destiny, that universal African connection, seeking to build that, um, um, UNIA movement. And so a lot of the early Rastafari would have been early Garveyites, so to speak, would have been brothers and sisters who were on that Afro-conscious um, meditation. And Marcus Garvey, like I said, was seen in some respects as like the John the Baptist, the one who said, look to the east, look for this man coming from Ethiopia. And he also, was instrumental in sharing that philosophy that, they see God from their spectacle. And so we are going to see God from our spectacle, and we use Ethiopia. So with these sort of prophetic utterances from Marcus Garvey led to the early Rastafari movement seeing the coronation of Haile Selassie as such a move, and would have adhered to, started to know. So here is it, from one extreme, you have this little powerful man who is self-taught, went to America, have this global influence, um, came back to the Caribbean, and then he spoke of, prophesying using biblical terms, so to speak, to put us as a people now in a biblical like philosophy, um, revelation, and thus laying birth to us seeing now Haile Selassie and learning again now from the Ethiopian legacy that Haile Selassie, there is some connection to Haile Selassie and King Solomon in the Bible. So, like I said, it's not all Rastafari who adhere to seeking that connection to give any credence to Haile Selassie and the how they respect or revere Haile Selassie. However, there is that biblical connection as well. So you found that, that within itself gave people even more strength to recognize that, okay, well, the Bible spoke to people like, looking like me and looking like you. And so all of that was a part of empowering, helping to empower our people and to continue the journey in regards to Rastafari. And I think Leonard Howell, who was and who is recognized as, so to speak, the father of Rastafari, or one of the first Rastafari. There would have been Rastafari brothers and sisters who would have been alive and would have also been influential at that time. However, he was the one who, out of that era, came up with a movement that sort of continued on the philosophies of Marcus Garvey in that self-sustenance, doing for yourself, don't wait for anybody, build your own community, create that. And so all of that, I think, was taken out of the philosophies and teachings of Marcus Garvey. So I think Marcus Garvey, if you were to ask the different groups within Rastafari, because Rastafari, to some extent at this point, I don't necessarily like to use this analogy, but it is actually the way it is. Just like within Christianity, you have different groups. So you have the Jehovah's Witness, you have the Seventh-day Adventists. Within Rastafari, you have different groups of Rastafari who holds and shares different philosophies as well. So you would have the Nyabingi, you have the 12 tribes, you have Bobo Shanti, House of Tilawadi, so there are different groups who may have different views, and that is why when I'm speaking at some points, I still I'm thinking within my head, as I know that there are different views, right? And try to make that abundantly clear. So it's not just one set view. But within all of those different groups, the common thing though is the philosophies of Marcus Garvey. It is clear and evident within Rastafari, and that is one of the major component of Rastafari as a cultural movement.
Thank you so much for that. All right, now, yeah, I get the part where most of the people that form that were strong in the Rastafari movement, they were formerly probably follower of Marcus Garvey, and of course, with
Right.
all the trouble that was coming out of the United States following the government that they want to close everything, they now find refuge in this movement. Um, but of Marcus Garvey himself, do we have evidence of him in this movement, either directly participating, attending meetings, say something that we can sort of hold on to?
You mean within Rastafari?
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I am not certain. I guess I would have to delve into, some historical documents. What I do know is that around the region, I know he would have set up the UNIA in different parts of the Caribbean, and so many of the folks, even in St. Kitts and Nevis, for example, there was a branch of the UNIA, and he visited St. Kitts on, I think, 2 occasions on his various trips around the Caribbean, seeking to develop and foster that sort of consciousness. In terms of direct I think he would have had direct contact with maybe some of the early members, but at that point, I don't think there was per se a Rastafari movement, because he was sort of, that's why I said, like John the Baptist, so to speak, spoke of he who was to come. So he spoke of, he's revered in that sense as like the John the Baptist who said, look to Africa, look to Ethiopia, for the coming of this new king. And so it's from that premise when Haile Selassie now was coronated, and Rastafari gravitated to that from that concept. So I am not certain if he was around physically within the realm of that transformation.
All right, now we see Marcus Garvey actually setting up the ground upon which other two important movements we leverage actually, talking of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And Malcolm X, of course, was more radical compared to Martin Luther King. And we see the United States now celebrating more Martin Luther King and not Malcolm X. And of course, both of them will be killed. This is usually the case, no? You dare to speak out against the power of the oppressors, they will always find a way to kill you, whether they kill you directly or they send someone else to do the job. And of course, there is always the brother who is the enemy in the room. There are no lack of Africans who are ready to pull the bullet against their own. Usually, they get paid for this, for doing this, and we need to take responsibility for that. In that we have not stood up for ourselves enough to be able to defend ourselves. But this is what I want to point out here. In that Martin Luther King, we use Christianity in his movement, and Malcolm X, we use Islam, of course, in the heart of their movement. So what I'm thinking now, what if maybe the movement the movement for African America that we follow, either Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, have reinforced this line of African consciousness instead of Islam and Christianity? Would this make any change? I'm just like reflecting about that.
Well, from how I looked at it, Marcus Garvey was nationalist, He was basically not necessarily interested in um, the assimilating into the different groups and cultures. Marcus Garvey was Africa for Africans, and he was just about we setting up our own systems, our own way of living, our own economy, our own businesses, our own whatever. That was the view. Whereas, Du Bois and some of the others, most of these were more preaching from assimilating and trying to be a part of the group and the setting, being. But Marcus Garvey was more like, let's build our community, and if anything, we go back to the motherland. He was on a whole different tangent versus trying to fight for equal rights in America. Marcus Garvey was like, okay, y'all have your system, okay, well, we will build our own system and we will operate. Just give us the right. Who give you the right to, want to own that and say that your system is the way it should go? And no, so he was very much fundamental, in these kind of views and opinions. And that's what I think causes, what I would say is different from what was pushed by Martin Luther King and Malcolm X to some extent.
Now, he came from Jamaica and he became very influential in the United States. Can we know maybe what could have helped him to gain that kind of influence that he had in the United States?
Well, the Caribbean, just like many of the other territories around the world where enslavement took place, there would have been some significant rough times as well for Marcus growing up. And I think I heard in one of the things I was listening to, one of the documentaries, that he at an early age used to go and help his father. I think his father used to dig graves and among a number of other things that he did. But there was a story where he was digging a grave and he sent Marcus down inside, I guess, to dig out, whatever he was emptying out, whatever. He went down on a ladder. But then his father took out the ladder and left him down there. And, the lesson that he was trying to teach him is that at the end of the day, only you can help yourself. There's no one there to help you but yourself. So you have to. So coming from that kind of, so he would have had that from very early. I think he demonstrated, leadership from very early. He learned to read and had an interest in reading from very early. And the Caribbean experience is totally different. Sometimes when I look at, as you speak of the fact that he came from the Caribbean, Malcolm X, his mother is originally from Grenada as well. And so that's Caribbean influence again. And so when you look at some of these very significant people who, even on the Islam side again, Louis Farrakhan, his father is from Jamaica and his mother is from St. Kitts and Nevis. So these are influential people who would have gone to the Caribbean and would have done some very significant things. And so the experiences in the Caribbean, the struggles in the Caribbean, the US, they had enslavement a bit longer. So whereas some of the Caribbean islands, the struggle basically was the same. Because he said, even in Marcus Garvey, he himself would have traveled to different places and he spoke to going into the mines of, I think it's Pittsburgh, he went to Panama, he went to a lot of different places, and he saw the struggle of the black man was the same. Basically, we always getting the bitter end of the stick. And so he was like, well, everybody else have their nation, everybody, why not we come together and do what we need to do? And so it was based on his experiences, not just in Jamaica, but as he traveled through, he just was empowered to and moved to help, our people organize and get ourselves together. And up to this point, seemingly, we have not gotten even anywhere close to where he has gotten. We look at Haile Selassie again, who he prophesied, and Haile Selassie attempted to form the UN, right? The UNIA, it was the African Union at that point, and we failed to come together as a people. We could have had a United States of Africa, and include the Caribbean as the 55th, as they have been seeking to do right now, territory, and build out. We having these issues, these visas, and we treating each other because we have adopted that colonial sentimentality. And even though they have moved physically, their systems are still in place, and the brainwash, the work that they did on our minds are still fully intact. That is why at this point still a lot of the philosophies of Marcus Garvey is not adopted and adhered to. So just as you speak to, you say in Jamaica and all over the place, they have monuments and so on, right? They use the monuments at whatever time to share whatever little sentiments. But in terms of the philosophy, just like Bob Marley right now, similar story. Jamaica used Bob Marley to market. Bob Marley is used as a marketing strategy right now. But in terms of Bob Marley's philosophy and what he stood for, how many are pushing those agendas? They love the music and it sounds good, but the things he stood for. Bob Marley stood for repatriation. Bob Marley was thinking about going back to Africa. Bob Marley was a cannabis enthusiast. Bob Marley was all about equal rights and justice, being love and unity and all of these things. But we are not seeing that. Marcus Garvey, likewise, people will talk about, yes, he was a national hero, but in terms of his philosophies, what he believed in, what he was trying to achieve, how much of that are we pushing today? How much of that are we willing to adopt today and accept and say, yes, let us do this, let us continue this, okay, it's not ships now, but let's get the African airline, let's get the and let's build that union, that movement. I see a little bit of movement happening, I must say, within the Caribbean. Antigua, I think, is seeking to make some connection with the airline. I think it's in Barbados is also seeking to make some direct links, But these are things that we need to seek to really make a reality in these times and truly demonstrate that we are really serious and ready. We have our millionaires and billionaires and so on. Let us seek to invest in each other. These are some of the things that and the influences I think that we need to adopt from Marcus Garvey. It is critical that we really, as you pointed out, seek to get the youths to debate more about Marcus Garvey and his philosophies and his opinions and what he was seeking to achieve and so on, so that we can keep these thoughts and ideas fresh in our minds, and so that we could get back to that level of Afro consciousness.
That is important. It is important that we realize that, it is possible that we can do this. It is important that we realize that we have the chance and the possibility to do that. You see, why it is important to talk about it is so that the thing can enter into our mind. We cannot talk about it only in 1 month. We need to continuously talk about it. I didn't even hear of Marcus Garvey. Maybe I would have heard of him somewhere in the music, in a song sung by somebody, maybe just as a random. But it's not supposed to be at a random. All through the time that I stayed in Nigeria before I came to Europe. And that was the age of 24. So I think that in Nigeria or in many other parts of Africa, we should have roads named after them. So that people ask, but why? What is the name? What does it mean? Museum named after them. People debate it, but what does that name mean?
But I think it's the Ghana flag that is red, black, and green with the star in it.
But anyway, many countries there, I think Guinea, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, many of them do have those colors. Yeah.
Well, I think most of those got the influence from that Marcus Garvey flag that he created in terms of pushing forward that UNIA. He was very influential. His influence was not just in America and the Caribbean. He influenced a lot of African leaders. Some of the early African leaders, very staunch African leaders, would have given a lot of credence to the influence of Marcus Garvey. I think he would have visited some of the African territories as well himself. And, would have, I don't recall all of the history, but I know I bumped into some of them as I, would have done research over the years of some of the influence that he would have had. And some of these leaders speak to the influence that Marcus Garvey would have had on them and their type of leadership in their territories at that time. And so, it's just quite interesting, like I said, when you look at the kind of contributions and the work that he would have done within his time frame, and to see that, many of us have not sought to pick up and continue like that relay race. It's like we dropped the baton, that's how it seems, the baton has been dropped. And so it's good that we are now having these kinds of conversation, and like you are pointing out, we need to have a lot more of these, because there are lots of things. Because I'm sure, like, for example, when I pointed out the fact that Malcolm X's mother is from Grenada, I'm sure you might not have known about that before.
No. I didn't know about that before. That is the importance of talking, no?
And I'm sure you didn't know about Louis Farrakhan's parentage and his attachment to the Caribbean as well. So things like that. Because you are coming from an African perspective, you might not know so much about the Caribbean history. And for us now in the Caribbean, a lot of us now are seeking to learn more about that African culture and practices, because we know that Africa is not just one island. It's a whole continent who was colonized by a whole different set of people. So you have different people speaking a lot of different languages, and each group might have had a different culture and different practices, and so there's so much to learn. But I think what part of what Marcus Garvey was hoping for us to achieve, which I think we really need to get to that point where I think it's someone of the president in Africa speaking about making their territory, free. You don't need any visa to travel. I think we need to get to that point. I think we need to zoom in and, at least choose one of the languages in Africa and seek to make it the official language of Africa. And so that, everybody, even not to try to disrespect any other person's language, but just like in Europe, even though you have Spain and Germany and all that, English is sort of seemingly the official language, that they use. We can do the same. You maintain your language, you maintain your whatever, but you have at least an official language. You create maybe an official currency that is used. People can still hold on to their different currency, but at least you have that United States of Africa kind of, economy and kind of movement, and maybe get a one president and things like that. But we these are some of the things that we saw to Marcus Garvey. When I read about Marcus Garvey and I research Marcus Garvey, these are some of the philosophies and opinions. Some of us who are in the diaspora should be thinking of, if we have businesses here, how can we, share the information, what we have gleaned here and learned in these parts? How can we transfer some of that knowledge and skills and help our people on that side to get their business set up? How can we develop trade, from there to these sides, and vice versa with the Caribbean and Africa and things like that. These are things that I would love to see manifest, and I'm willing to commit myself to manifest, and that's why I embrace opportunities like this, where I get the opportunity to, in any way, network with our African brothers and sisters, so we can, share some of these ideas, because in some cases too, some of us have a lot of misconceptions towards each other, based on a lot of things that probably I just said. You might hear somebody say, oh, the Africans them don't like, Americans, or Africa don't like, Caribbean people, and you get a lot of these misconceptions, whereas with things like these, opportunities like these, where we get to discuss and share and exchange ideas and views and opinions. We have, things happening at present, like Woody Meyer right now is in Jamaica, and he has traveled to a number of Caribbean islands and is doing this in a more tangible way. We are doing it virtually, in the sense of, exchanging ideas, from the Caribbean to Africa. We're doing this on a virtual level, but he's doing it on a physical level, where he actually go to the various territories, immerse in the culture, meet with the people, and beginning to recognize how much of African cultures and traditions that exist amongst the people, and how much in some cases the people do these things and don't even recognize that it's a part of their African history and culture, but they practice it anyway, So it is very, very important that we seek to do things like these.
We have to. Even at the level of academia, I've interviewed a number of university lecturers where I've proposed the idea. Of course, I can see that it's going on. It's already going on, but we need to encourage it more, where we don't need to rely on the monitor, which is the European, to do the story for us. We don't to do the connection for us, to tell us what the people in the diaspora are thinking, and then tell the people in the diaspora what the people in Africa are thinking. We don't need to do that. We don't need that intermediary anymore. We need to do the study. If you are a university lecturer in California, you don't have any problem connected to a university in Accra or a university in Lagos or in Johannesburg or in any other part of Africa. Liaise with them, talk to them, ask them questions. If you have any question, ask them. They can even share information. Yeah, go on.
One of the things I'm seeking to do right now, as I'm seeking to build this network, just like you are doing your outreach, I am myself seeking to make this, not just, talk about it. I really want to make it a reality. So for at this point, I have connected with Dr. Aikeche, who is very much up my street, especially where agriculture is concerned. And I am, seeking to embrace his brain re-engineering technique, and seeking to now see how we can find ways of creating a project, an agricultural-based project in the Caribbean, where now we can utilize his connections with universities, that we can offer some training programs where now we can do that, exchange of skills and knowledge and technology, and at the same time, folks be able to be certified and get an opportunity to spend time and immerse in a different culture at the same time. So it's things like these that I am seeking to do, and I'm really, seeking to build that network and make that opportunity. So, we have to get him on this program as well. So maybe that's one of the guys that you could probably interview and see how we can make these things a reality, because I love the contributions that he is making, and I see the potential for us to do a lot of things in that regard. And especially where agriculture is concerned, that is, self-sustenance, as we talk about Marcus Garvey. So it's not necessarily a side topic. It is a very much vital topic in regards to Marcus Garvey, because Marcus Garvey, one of his major push is self-sustenance. And in order to sustain yourself, you have to be able to feed yourself. So that's one of the critical parts of his movement as well. That is why he wanted us to be able to have the ability to trade instead of having to depend on, the ships from Europe or Germany or whatever. He knew that we had, lots of food in Africa, and we could have used the ships to be able to bridge that gap and feed our people with much more healthier food than you would get from some of those territories that were using the residues from wars as fertilizer to feed people.
Those resources are still there. They are still available in Africa, and Africa is looking for collaboration from his brothers and sisters all over the world. So, like we are continuously stressing here, the time has come for us to network and work together. You remember what we discussed before. We are on a mission to be able to be the bridge between Africa and the diaspora. And we do this on the level of business. We do this on the level of cooperation. We do this on the level of sharing knowledge. We do this on the level of exploring our experiences. I learn from what you know, you learn from what I know, because no one particular group knows it all. But of course, according to our African ideas of life, we are always collaborating, working with one another to be able to advance in life. That is where we are. We are one. We are Africans. Whether you call yourself Afro-Caribbean or Afro-German or Afro-Italian or Afro-American or Afro-Britain, you can see that there is Afro in the beginning, no? Which means we are one. We are certainly one. All right, now tell me about.
Yeah. Question.
Yeah.
For me, I tend to not even want to just add anything else to it. Why can't we just accept that we're Africans? Yeah. The Europeans accept that they're Europeans, right? They might tell you, okay, I'm a European based in Germany. I'm a German, you know what I mean? But they're not ashamed or afraid of accepting the fact that they are European. We seem to have a problem with that. I'm African American. I'm Afro-Caribbean. No, I'm an African. Like Peter Tosh, in one of his songs said, don't care where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you're an African. Don't mind your nationality. You have got the identity of an African. So you could come from Switzerland. You could come from Germany. You're an African. Why can't we just accept that? And that's just the reality. And these are some of the things that Marcus Garvey was fighting for, that for us to feel good about ourselves, to feel that we should be able to don't have a problem in embracing ourselves. That brainwash education that we got in terms of, using the media to paint Africa as the worst in the world. So all you used to see of Africa is, people starving and all the poor shanty towns and, all these things that they use to make us don't even want to associate with Africa and just look up to, the European style. So we were Europeanized, get this. My hair is bad. At nights, when I go to lay down, my hair crawls out the window and go and steal and rob and so on. So they say you have bad hair. You got to go and you have to straighten out your hair. So you had the black people getting, an iron comb and so trying to get their hair straightened out because they're telling them that they have bad hair, because the only hair that is recognized is the straight, hair and all of these things. You had, if you were darker or you're black and ugly. But if you're a mulatto and you're lighter skinned, you were able to be you pass a little bit and you could get certain positions and you might get a little job there, but definitely if you were certain, so these are some of the things that Marcus Garvey fought against, because he knew of the classism and all of these different isms and schisms that were used to suppress us. And it got to the point where some of us were brainwashed enough that they were able to use them to help to oppress us. So then it was, it came to a point where it wasn't even them who were oppressing us. It was our own selves oppressing, like in the Rastafari case.
It's still the
It
same
wasn't
today. It hasn't changed that much.
in Rastafari case, it wasn't the Europeans or the Caucasians who were fighting Rastafari. It was the black people who look like me, were fighting Rastafari, because Rastafari was saying that they're following Marcus Garvey movement. We ain't studying with these people here who give these people the queen and so the authority to do this. No, we could govern ourselves. We could control our system. We could feed ourselves. We can set up our own structures and, manage ourselves, But then they were able to convince a set to follow them and, continue to maintain that system. And we're reaping the results of it. In some of the Caribbean territories, you would still see evidence of that. So, like, for example, that revolutionary spirit is very much in Jamaica as well. Recently, Jamaica had an election. I think it's just a couple of days ago, and I am not even talking about the results of the election, because I think they were still in some issues with that. But at the end, out of the 100% of people that can vote, only 29% actually voted. So only 29% of the Jamaican population participated in the election to elect whoever they elected.
And why?
So which means majority of the people
didn't vote,
opted not to vote. So technically right now, based on a system like that, the 29%, and remember now, it's not even a full 29%, so whoever is going to lead is only going to get a percentage of that 29% that voted, But they are the ones who are going to be determining the destiny of the other 70% who opted not to follow that system, because you find that people are getting fed up of these kinds of systems. A lot more people are becoming, as we are saying in modern times, woke and being conscious and being able to see through the psychological games that have been perpetuated over the years. And I guess this is why Rastafari got so much fight, and I guess that's why Marcus Garvey got so much fight, because Marcus Garvey was seeking to show the people reasons why they can't continue to maintain this kind of foolishness, and why they can't continue to adhere to that system that was designed not for their benefit.
Thank you so much for that. All right, now this is 2024. We are talking about Marcus Garvey today. What would you say are some of his key messages that must remain with us as we continue to celebrate him, remember him for the impact he have on our life? What are some of those key messages that need to remain with us?
Well, some of the key messages, Marcus Garvey, one of his quotes that sticks with me, is one which speaks to a people without a knowledge of their past is likened to a tree without roots. And if we don't learn about our past, then we wouldn't really have a true understanding of where we are now. And if we really don't have a true understanding of where we are now, then definitely we would not be able to guide ourselves on the path that we should be on for the future properly. So, in 2024, some of his key things in terms of organization, that's one of the things that we lack still presently. The ability to work together as, a group of people that Willie Lynch syndrome is still seemingly very evident, where we, are programmed to distrust each other and only trust, the other group of people. Um, you know, like Marcus Garvey, Marcus Garvey always never had a problem with, um, the Caucasians, and it's not about hating them or having anything against them. As a matter of fact, he always said that they are wonderful people. But our problem is that we should have ourselves organized the same way, just so they organize themselves to do what they are doing. Why are we unable to organize ourselves to do what we need to do? And until we get to that point where we start to see things like that. Though his views were unorthodox, in his time, they are still very much relevant today. And until we really start to do that, um, you know, that seeking to govern ourselves, create um, economic opportunities together, building businesses. His stance where that is concerned, his approach where that is concerned, the media getting information out, that whether it's newspapers ain't saying much now, but I see that you're doing a good bit in terms of storytelling and putting stories or writing books, addressing the topics like you're pointing out, debates, having these kind of interviews and so on that would engage and stimulate the youth's thoughts. At least let them know still that, yeah, man, you still have some people out there who's trying to achieve these goals, and we can tap into each other still and make some of these things a reality. So in 2024, I still see that we have the opportunity to tap into some of these things, like I'm saying, and still really zoom in. Maybe like you're pointing out, we could seek to get groups to zoom in on Marcus Garvey, and then maybe seek out some of the areas and focus on them, and do them in a way, even without maybe saying, okay, we doing Marcus Garvey, but just by doing the things that he would have want done, then we would be achieving the goal at the same time.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I really do. All right. Now, for people who want to learn more about you, they want to maybe connect with you, how can they reach out to you?
Well, I am, all over. I'm on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Um, I'm mostly anything about agriculture, development, recycling, off-grid living, healthy food, those kind of things. My WhatsApp, 1-559-541-2758, and you could get me at email islandflavors. That's ILANDFLAVAZ at gmail.com. And you can visit our online store to get some of our value-added products at allnaturalboostersusa.com. That's one word, allnaturalboostersusa.com. We create a lot of products from the foods that we grow. We grow organic produce, like self-sustenance, like I said, like Marcus Garvey, Marcus Garvey philosophy. So a lot of the things that I do, I do, but it might not necessarily come out as me saying, "By this is Marcus Garvey," but it's the influence, basically the same thing. So I feed myself, I grow what I eat, and I'm on the philosophy of, seeking to not just feed myself, but also feed as many as I can and get as many people as I can to get back into nature and stick with nature. We seemingly have a real crisis right now where that is concerned. Even within the agricultural sector, we are straying more and more and more and more away from reality, to the point where we don't even want to use soil anymore. We are changing the seeds to suit the pesticides, instead of finding natural ways to deal with some of these things. So that's part of why I got into doing some of what I do. So folks, feel free to stay in touch. And we will be back on this program at some other time with Obi. So I give thanks, my brother, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this topic, and I look forward to continue this network and continue engaging in different topics where this is concerned. Anything to help to build that bridge between Africa, the Caribbean, and others in the diaspora as well. It doesn't matter where you are, because interestingly enough, I think when I was listening to one of your interviews, I think you said that you're in India.
No, no,
Kind of
no.
interesting.
I mean Italy.
Italy.
Yeah,
See what I mean? So that's quite interesting. Italy, who had that war with Ethiopia, right?
That had a war with Ethiopia.
You see, quite interesting. And here you are, in what would be deemed as the enemy's territory, so to speak. But it's good still that we could have these kind of discussions, because it would be interesting to hear also of the way life is for you, how you are accepted in a society such as Italy. What's the experience? Do you can I ask a few questions before you leave, because this is quite interesting.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Like, what's the experience for you being in Italy? Because I think it's predominantly a Caucasian society, right?
Yeah. It's a European country. Of course, it's a Mediterranean country, though.
So how are you embraced? How what's the experience? Do you experience racism? Have you ever actually, since you're there, do you experience it? If not experience it personally, have you seen it? Feel it? Like you can sense by anything like that?
Well, Italy is like any other European country. The same feeling and sentiment is the same. Of course, you do have good people, very good-hearted people, but you also have this individual who are unable to see you as a human being. So they think that what they see is an image in their head, which is see you as a color instead of a human being, they see you as an object instead of a person. So there are this individual like this. So racism, it is almost impossible for an African to live in Europe without being a victim of racism. This is almost impossible. Although I don't really lay emphasis so much on that, because I tend to be a little bit more positive. One, secondly, because I tell the story of a lot of people who tell me more about this. So I tend to try to balance the story up sometime, because since, like I said, there are also some people who have showed me goodwill, people of Italy who have showed me goodwill. Whenever I have bad experience, I use that one to balance it up sometime. But in overall, I see both sides, both the good and the bad one, living here in Italy. Yeah.
But in terms, I guess maybe because you're there physically, I could understand your diplomatic response, to some extent. But like, is it common, like, where, like, in terms of like going to restaurants, going to stores, do you get like that look, or people follow you around, or like things like that? No.
Well, in the beginning, it would have been like that because me, I came here in 2004. The first people who came here have more of that as an experience, but for those of us that came a little later, the people have beginning to get used to that, as it were. For the first people, because since this is actually my research, trying to understand the story of people, so I've been doing it for a very long time. I've been gathering the data together. I've written 2 books from it. I've produced a documentary on it. So, it's not new to me. About the experience of the first people that came here, like in the city where I am, which is Verona, or in northern part of Italy, the experience that the first African here in, say, the last 40 years, 35 years, their experience and our experience today is slightly different. So some of their experience, it might not correspond exactly to what I have now, in that time, they didn't have any house to stay. They were just sleeping on the train station. Even though some of them were working, they were having the ability to be able to pay for a house. They didn't have nobody to give them a house. I remember, for example, a story of a man who were telling me this man is coming from Eritrea. He was a student, so meaning he didn't really have a problem speaking Italian. So on the phone, he told somebody who was looking for a house. They told him, hey, well, the house is available. So the person went there, but they saw that it was an African. They said, oh, the house is not available. So there are some of these experiences that there are a lot of experiences that we have that are not really good. But I repeat again, we do have also some good experience sometimes. Not every Italian will treat you like that, because otherwise we will never get a house here. I have a house where I'm speaking now. It's inside a house that I'm paying for. If I say they never give you a house, where am I living? I didn't bring this house from Nigeria, no. Yeah, we do have both way. We have some that's they like to treat you bad because that is their nature. But we also have some that have treated you good. That is really the reality for me. I can't tell you that I've always seen bad people. I've seen bad one, but I've also seen good one. Yeah, that's for sure.
I know people have different experiences, wherever they go. Okay, like for me, okay, I've been to Canada as well, and I'm here in the US, right? And what I found in the difference, right? Like the Canadians are seemingly more subtle with it, whereas here people are more blatant. For me personally, I have not had any negative experience, but I've seen, right? So for me personally, I've not encountered anybody who has given me any reason to say, okay, I have been, being treated unfairly or whatever. In a business place I go, I get treated the same way, So I've never seen it personally, but I know it exists, and I've seen other people who would have experienced it. But it's always good to learn about, how we manage in various different territories across the world, and to look at the experiences that sometimes not just you, because I asked you personally, but I was more looking at, generally how the society is approached, because like Marcus Garvey would say, if we are not free, if only one of us is free, I'm not free until all of my brothers and sisters are free. So it's from that concept. So I always tend to kind of still like to get a scope of how, other brothers and sisters are dealt with, and what the community is like, on a whole in some of these different territories, because the struggle still continues.
Absolutely, absolutely. It have happened to me
Yeah.
personally. Like I said, I've got some bad experience, but I've also got a good experience. And of course, for the people that have reported their story, a lot has happened to them. Of course, more to
Right.
them than to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
That's
right.
it.
Yeah, and likewise, because like for me, I am open. I'm not. I have a lot of Caucasian friends that are very genuine. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, for me personally, the only time I have a problem is if you are going to be offended by me expressing myself and sharing who I am. If that offends you, then definitely I know you can't be my friend, because something is wrong with you. You should be able to actually see where I'm coming from. Even if you don't want to accept it, you should be able to deal with it, because I am able to deal with you. I am able to still put aside whatever and deal with you. You know what I mean? So that's the approach that I take. I don't try to impose things on anyone, but if you're my friend or whatever, and we're having a discussion and a topic comes up, and I'm gonna share my view and express it from my position. If you get offended, then something is wrong. Like, hey.
That's so true. That's so true. Though we should be able to mature and be able to live among different people, but not everybody is cut off for that. So, and for like you said, if somebody cannot accept you the way you are, then you are not supposed to be staying hanging around with those kind of people.
Yeah, it's a journey, and for me, I love the experience. I love to meet different people from different parts of the world. I love to, so I love what you're doing actually, in terms of immersing yourself in the culture. And I would do that. I would go to a different territory, and because I would love to do that in Africa, as a matter of fact. Be able to go to different,
It's open.
territories. Huh?
It's open to you. Of course, we're going to have that conversation after this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we can do some of these, kinds of, um, first-hand documentaries, information, immerse ourselves in the culture, learning a little bit about, how and why. Because I'm always curious to that. Just like I could understand you. maybe that's why we get along so well, because it's like me. I'm very curious to learn different. Well, that was one of the subjects I taught, actually, social studies.
Mm-hmm.
So I am very much interested in that. You know, the way you live, your culture, why you do what you do, how you do what you do, without any, you know,
any strings attached. Yeah.
It's just to learn. You know, it's just okay. Now I know. Okay, if I want to adapt it, you know, it's up to me. If I don't want to, then okay, at least I just know that this is the way you do what you do, and I respect it.
It's very good. It's very good. It's the right approach.